Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the StatBid e-commerce webinar series. We're broadening our focus a little bit to more digital marketing audience development this time. So this will be applicable to folks in e-commerce, but a much broader audience as well. Our guest today is Rand Fishkin, co-founder of Sparktoro, and we'll be diving into audience development and building high ROI marketing engines. Rand, did you want to give a little bit more of an introduction and backstory, or would you like to dive right in?
I mean, let's do both. Sure. Yeah. So first off, thank you for having me. Thanks to the StatBid team. I'm excited to be here and share all this stuff with you. So yes, some folks might know me from a company that I started previously called Moz, which was in the SEO software space, and did a lot of, I was there for a very long time. I left that company about 3.5 years ago now, and started this new one called Sparktoro, which is in kind of market research, audience intelligence, and insights. Basically, Sparktoro is this giant database of web and social profiles that you can search over and learn more about what audiences listen to, read, watch, follow, pay attention to, talk about, how they describe themselves. And this is, of course, very useful for lots of marketing and persona building and market research types of applications.
We're not just a fan, we're a client as well.
Yes, and StatBid is a very, very supportive and wonderful client. And we have only been live, I guess, a year and a month, but yeah, already have like 700 folks using the platform at one of the paid subscription tiers, and like 30,000 plus people who are using the free version. So the free version is certainly something that anyone can go check out. But one of the things that, Roy, I wanted to talk about today is this concept that if you are in a world where historically you've been kind of like searching, waiting for customers to search for you in Google and then come to your website, I think that approach might not be right for everyone. And maybe missing a lot of audience opportunity. So instead, I'll talk you through some stories, right? If you've been in marketing, especially on the e-commerce side, I bet you've seen stories and case studies, folks who invested in essentially a combination of content and SEO meets search marketing advertising, probably some Facebook and display ads, right? That kind of thing. So you've read stuff like, oh man, Airbnb created this incredible SEO moat, and Pinterest has done all these amazing things with search and content, and Canva has done all these amazing things. And, case study after case study that focus on a couple of kind of top of funnel to middle of funnel channels that historically were not all that popular. When I like to complain to Casey, my co-founder, I'm like, man, when I started Moz, I couldn't get anyone to do SEO. They thought it was just this black hat spammy tactic. Now that we started Sparktoro, everyone's doing SEO, and I can't get them to think about any other marketing channel. Right? So
yeah, we imagined that the folks that recognize what Sparktoro is for out of the gates are probably already on it, and now there's this awareness gap that I felt into when you were first talking about it. But after you launched it, I fell into the first group. But that second group is definitely in that same nascent stage for sure.
Yeah, right. So like I don't think there's anything wrong with these stories. I don't think there's anything wrong with investing in search marketing and content marketing. I think those can be great channels. Absolutely, they can. It's just that they're incomplete, right? It's just that the way these things work is not fundamentally the only way to do it, right? And it's certainly, in my opinion, no longer the best way, especially for small and medium brands, what I'd call sort of startup or challenger brands versus kind of big industry giants, to build a competitive advantage over everyone else in their field. Like, when I started doing SEO and PPC and those types of channels, there were so few companies competing that even my crappy little blog could outrank everybody else, right? And nowadays, this is just not true. Any sector you want to enter, especially e-commerce, where it's so hyper competitive, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of well-funded brands that you're competing against. So one of the ways I like to try and do this, right, is like visualize a slope. for some reason, it always helps me to have in my mind a visual concept of the strategies that I'm investing in or not. And so when I think about sort of Facebook and Google ads in particular, right, I'm essentially paying money to these giants, and every incremental impression, every conversion costs me dollars. So when, yeah, right, like, and when I try and improve, there's all these forces kind of working against me. I mean, obviously, right, like competition and rising prices and variable inventory and more people bidding, and the structural platforms themselves. Facebook and Google have the following incentive. You know, if you are whatever, I don't know, selling this Sigma lens, you know, for the Sony DSLR camera on your camera website, and it costs $500, and you're making a profit of $200 off of that, Facebook and Google want to charge you $199.99 to get a new customer, right? That is their incentive. They want to take all of the possible profit margin from every possible company out there. And because there are tons of venture-backed and private equity-backed companies who want growth over profitability, there's a lot of dollars flowing, right? There's a lot of willingness to spend $210, $400 to acquire a new customer, right? And so I kind of think of ads as being boulder pushing. Like every step of progress requires the same amount of effort. You don't gain efficiency. And when these external forces reduce your return on investment, every step is harder, right? So the slope is potentially curving up instead of down. So I'm like, okay, well, if it's not going to be, you know, if it's not going to be Facebook and Google ads, could we go with organic? And the reality is, there's great research from Rival IQ, who publishes a report every year of median engagement across social platforms. And you can see 0.09%. You get to reach not even 1 in 1,000 of your Facebook page organic subscribers. I mean, they're so, you know, the slope here is just untenable. SEO and content, which this is like the classic investment now, right? The last 5 years, I think SEO and content have been how every e-commerce brand thinks about this. And it's really tough if you are not already an established authority and brand. You know, I had this strange experience of thinking that I was extremely good at SEO. Lots of people thought I was sort of, oh, Rand Fishkin, you know, he knows lots about SEO. I'm like, okay, yeah. And I did. And I'm able to rank for things. But when I moved to Sparktoro in a brand new domain, I can tell you right now, the number of visits we get from Google outside of our brand name is, I think it's less than 100 a week.
Right.
It is just teeny tiny. Almost all of our search traffic is branded at this point. And look, it is the reality that over time, what I hope over the next 5 years, right, is that we build up brand, we build up authority. I continue to produce content that earns traffic, but it is a long process. And with just 2 founders, you know, working on the business, it's going to be a serious undertaking. It's not until people start to know you, like you, trust you, prefer you in their search results, get links pouring in, the news is talking about you, you're getting brand mentions all over the place. Then, yes, then your content starts to rank with very little effort. But until that point, this is just an immense struggle. And a lot of those inspiring SEO and content case studies, they're happening over here, but they're being pitched and marketed to the challenger brands and the startups and the early stage companies and the SMBs. That is not great, right? Because it's selling you a false story of what you can realistically achieve. The stories that worked for Canva and Stripe and Airbnb and Pinterest and all these other companies, they're not going to work for the majority of us. It's also the case, right? I've been doing some research around, you know, Google in the last few years, right? That Google, much like Facebook, right, where Facebook's trying to keep everybody on Facebook in their communities, they want to keep you in groups, they want to have the engagement happen on their platform, not on your website. Google is trying to keep people on their website. And so 2/3 of searches now end without a click, and Google is making ever more advancements to making that number even bigger. A fair counterpoint to this that Google sort of brought up when I published this research was, but we keep sending out more traffic overall because Google is growing searches fast enough that their own suction and siphoning of the traffic back to themselves is not taking more than the growth that they're getting. But there will be an inflection point. I suspect it's happening very, very soon. And you can see that in some sectors, that opportunity is already declining.
And
right?
Google moves in that direction very overtly. Buy on Google is a perfect example within the paid space where they're using that same sort of frugal crossover to try and keep you on the platform in a very Facebookian way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Their incentives are not aligned with yours.
Right.
So it's going to be really tough long term as Google, whatever. They have a bad quarter. You're going to see more ads. You're going to see, more Google properties taking this space. Really, the only thing holding them back from doing this full bore is potential antitrust legislation, right? And we don't know how much pressure there is there realistically. So hard to know what the future of that is. So instead, right, one of the things that we have been doing because of this sort of Google and Facebook and advertising problem is thinking about what I've been calling influence marketing. I'll tell you in a sec why I call it that. But basically, we're going out and finding webinars and podcasts and events and conferences and meetups and blogs and websites and email newsletters, and the list goes on and on and on, of people and publications and organizations that reach our target audience, right? So there's sort of all this media and social media and online media that people consume who are our potential target customers. Can we reach them through other sources? There's a reason I don't use the R in influence. But in this case, what's nice is the starting curve is way less steep. And by being new, you have this nice thing of novelty, which is like a something that other publications want to cover, right? So it is in the interest of the press and media and of social media users and of email newsletters to cover new things, as opposed to, Google and Facebook, who sort of have different incentives. And when your brand grows, the friction of these outreach decreases. And once you're an established player, of course, that curve gets even more downhill. But this is just much less steep than the SEO and content curve is today. Well, I call this influence marketing because it's not quite public relations, right? That definition is too broad, so that's not it. It's not digital PR, which has come to mostly mean I'm doing link building for SEO, but with a more palatable name. So that doesn't quite work either. And influencer marketing with an R is just paying half-naked people on Instagram and YouTube to promote your product. That's not what I'm doing either. I don't think a lot of my customers care if I have a six-pack or whatever. But so that doesn't quite work. And so you can call whatever you want. I've been calling it influence marketing, which is sort of like I go find the sources of influence for my audience and I go market to them, paid or organic, through those sources, right? I'm like, oh, hey, Roy and Shiloh, you guys have this nice StatBed a workshop coming up, and we've hung out before and done some events together. Hey, let's have a chat, right? Perfect. This is good audience match for you, good content for you, good match for me. Wonderful, right? It's a co-marketing sort of relationship. So I like this. This is what I've been using. I don't want to suggest that influence marketing is the only way to go. I just think your goal as an e-commerce marketer is essentially to find a flywheel that scales with decreasing friction, meaning you do a marketing thing, whatever that marketing thing is. It could be create a new Google ad or be a guest on a podcast or run a webinar. And then you boost that thing's reach, right, to you amplify it to your existing audience and hopefully to some new audiences. And then fingers crossed, if you have produced something of value, you will engage and grow that audience, which means you will improve your algorithmic signals across all these algorithmic platforms, right? Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Google News and Google Discover and YouTube and Reddit and email marketing platforms, right? Email deliverability systems and whatever, Gmail and all of those kinds of things. And so when you do this thing next time, when you repeat this process, you get a higher return on investment because you have more people you're reaching and you have better algorithmic signals. And slowly but surely, this builds a competitive advantage, right? This gets you to where you want to do it. Google and Facebook, frankly, make that really difficult to do because they have pricing power thanks to essentially a duopoly control, along with Amazon and e-commerce, right? So sort of those three giants have this not just pricing power, but reach power. And so they are able to drive the ecosystem more than you're able to influence it yourself. If you are competing against more established players, right, there are tons of well-funded folks in that space who, like we mentioned, are going after growth, not profit. And my sense is that most of the folks on this show are interested in profitable customer acquisition, not raw growth rate.
There are folks that are good at burning money to build a brand, and yeah, you're right. We are not those, and we don't tend to attract those either.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it can work, but it's a very low odds, right? You look at the venture capital sort of ecosystem and you can see like, oh, okay, well, 95 out of 100 venture investments don't meet their minimum portfolio returns. And even those that do, usually only one or two of those are kind of in the 3x or above. So if you can go do things like this, I found this Reddit thread, right? This guy basically did influence marketing, this independent video game developer who, put his game on this platform, found this small streamer who picked it up and ended up writing about it. And then a bigger streamer did a video about it. And wow, look at this. My wish lists have a strong correlation with sales when a video goes live, and building up that excitement around it is key to a successful industry. But that's kind of how you make a competitive advantage in this world, not trying to, unprofitably acquire tons of wish lists through Facebook ads or Google ads or content in SEO. People don't even discover video games really. Nobody is like, I want a new game where I am, what is this? Oh, space survival terraforming. It's not, you're not going to get people through search, right?
Right.
When you do this, when you invest in these sources of influence for your audience and build up brand equity so that people know you, like you, trust you, every other marketing channel and tactic benefits. So even if you're listening to this webinar and you're like, yeah, Rand, this sounds nice. I'm pretty sure my CEO is still going to want to throw 90% of our budget at ads. Okay. How would you like to make your ads work much better? Because they will work much better, right? Brief story time. So during quarantine, I got a little obsessed with making recipes, right? And I really got into Japanese cooking. So I'm making my katsu and my oyakudon and my hot pots, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. And I keep seeing this dish. You see this clay pot here. I go check out like the best way to make Japanese rice, and of course, it's recommending that I get a donabe, which is essentially this clay earthenware pot that heats up in a very particular way and cools down in a particular way. And I see, oh, okay, there's this cookbook about donabe and all these things from it. Almost everyone who tries plain donabe rice for the first time is shocked by how perfect the rice tastes and how easy it is to cook. Oh man, that sounds really good. I want that. How do I get that? And I keep seeing it over and over again. This email newsletter I'm subscribed to, Taste, which I highly recommend. Donabe isn't just a pot, it's an experience. you're speaking my language here. Like I'm falling for this. You know what? I give up. I'm going to spend $170 on this clay pot from Japan, this Kamado-san rice cooker. And I love it. Like I use it all the time, right? There I'm making my katsu, I'm making my, what is that? My ginger pork. And yeah, it's just fantastic. This thing's great. I've probably used it 60, 70 times in 200 days since getting it. And what happened here, right, is that the brands that built Affinity, in this case, in the donabe space, right, it was the Kamado-san. Hey, I know that brand. It's recommended on all the Japanese recipe websites. It's not paying the most, but it's likely getting the highest ROI, right? But brands that only invest in ads, I have never heard of them. They're going to be paying more. I don't know whether they're any good. Sure, there's one that's $34. There's one that's $140 and it looks fancy, but am I going to get it? Lots of branded search, right? Lots of people searching for you and clicking on you and buying from you means better ad scores and lower cost per click on average. In fact, the website that does the best with this, that apparently is the top seller of donabe in the United States, is this website right here, Toiro, which does the worst SEO on the planet. Look at that title tag. There's no meta description. That's the worst snippet. They don't even try. They just SEO. What's that? I don't care. Right? We're the #1 seller of donabe. Why? Because all the sources of influence in Japanese cooking world online, in the US at least, talk about Toiro's Kamado-san donabe. In fact, the woman who runs this website is sort of often credited as the person who brought the culture of donabe cooking, rice cooking, to the United States. I would take that over all the ad positions in the world, right? Essentially what happened is the more you built up brand awareness with the right audience, the better every channel performs. Her website is ranking super high in Google despite doing no SEO whatsoever, right? I mean, if she put the word donabe in the title, you know she'd be #1. It's really, it almost bothers the old SEO in me, right? But this is a very, very effective methodology. You kind of go figure out who your customers are. You find the messages that resonate with them. You uncover their sources of influence, right? In the recipe world, right? Toiro has figured out that, it's all these recipe websites and sort of reviewers and YouTubers and people who run email newsletters in that space. And you find out where that audience engages. And then you're essentially going and telling those stories that you know work in the places you know your audience pays attention. It's a simple process. It's sort of like marketing 101 from the 1960s, but it works. The challenge is to do it well, you've got to know your audience and customers, right? So if you're going to build a flywheel like this, you have to be able to answer things like, which marketing things are worth doing? Which things should I try? Should I try pitching podcasts? Should I try sponsoring them? Should I try to do co-marketing? Is an email newsletter right for me? Should I be building a blog? Should I be doing PR? Well, if you understand your audience, you can figure those things out, right? You can make educated guesses about that. This is also how you know what resonates with them. What's worked before for this audience? What do they pay attention to? What are they subscribing to and talking about over and over again and following? And then how do I improve future performance next time, right? What's working in the sector? Which sources of influence are growing their audiences and building up that sort of flywheel methodology? It's folks who are very engaging on social, or it's folks who do a really great job on YouTube, or it's people who have an email newsletter that lots of folks recommend, or they're doing it through guest appearances. Whatever it is, you've got to find that. Generally speaking, I find that audiences kind of, again, I like to visualize this. I find that these audiences fall into sort of these 4 groups. So there's people who are your customers today, right? And you have attributes about them, things that you know about them. There's potential customers, people who are right customer fits. They look a lot like your current customers. And they're the people you most want to reach and influence to sort of convert. And then there's the people and publications that reach them. I sort of lump these into this amplifier group, right? Could be on social, could be events, could be bloggers, could be journalists, could be podcasts and video content creators, email newsletter operators, whatever. And then there's kind of a broader community, right? Like people who consume the content, but they're not really potential customers. And maybe there's people who don't really broadcast or amplify, but they talk privately, right? So buzz can build among them. Okay. When I think about these 4 groups, I worry that a lot of marketing ignores these amplifiers. It does not pay attention to the people who reach your current and potential customers. And because of that, you lose out on a tremendous amount of opportunity. So I try the most successful marketing that I do, right? If I try and Venn diagram this, right? The best marketing that I do appeals to both potential amplifiers, people who will make that message, that story, the product reach more people, and potential customers. So, right, in the case of Sparktoro, Roy, you would fall into this group, right, of pink and green overlap. You are both someone who's a good potential customer. Hopefully you're getting some value from Sparktoro, and also have the potential to tell other people about it and amplify it to your sort of social channels. I know you and I have a lot of fun on Twitter together, right? And all that kind of stuff. And I worry when marketing is exclusively targeted toward customers rather than amplifiers, especially when the ecosystem of how information spreads and how brands are built is often on the backs of these potential amplifiers.
Sure.
Whether you're creating whatever it is, a new fashion brand, or you're selling kitchenware online, or you are making independent video games, or you're selling, camera equipment, like it kind of doesn't matter. There are a group of people and publications that reach your audience who are fundamentally different from the people who consume that content and might be good buyers. And if you're going to overpay to reach this group, you will, generally speaking, have a very hard time of building up that competitive advantage over folks who are better funded than you, willing to take losses for a long time, willing to prioritize growth over profit. That, it's only if money is your primary competitive advantage that you can essentially throw all your dollars into reaching and converting potential customers, as opposed to kind of end-arounding the process, being creative, building something that potential amplifiers want to talk about. So if we know our audiences, then we will know how to market, right? We'll know which tactics and channels are worth experimenting with. We'll earn insight into how do we get our audience's attention, why will they pay attention, and how to improve this process in the future. Like, where am I encountering friction? What do I need to do to fix that? My favorite way to do it is it's basically 3 things. It's interviews, it's surveys, and it is data at scale, passively collected. So I'll talk about all 3 of those real fast, right? So I go into my local Jewish deli, Schmaltzy's, which is here in Ballard. It's it's pretty good. It's pretty good. There's some things that they could improve, but the owner will talk to me, right? Oh, what brought you in, and what did you try that you liked, and what did you not like? And I got to be frank here. Your black and white is the best black and white outside of New York City, but the matzo ball soup. I mean, I'm not going to schlep that all the way over my grandfather. He's not going to be happy with that. And who do you like ordering with? We have a conversation, right? They're talking to me in person, one-on-one. I do the same thing for Sparktoro, right? I talk to customers and potential customers all day, every day. And then I like to validate that with data at scale, because you can get very biased by one-on-one conversations like, oh, Roy told me he was really looking for this, and I bring that back to Casey, and then we build it, and Roy loves it, and the 699 other Sparktoro customers are like, what is that? Why did you build that? So we try and validate data at scale to determine, what are people interested in. I like asking questions like these. Imagine describing product X to a friend. What would you say? You look at the people who have said things that are very compelling over, and they appear many times, and you're like, boom, that's my messaging. That's how I want to get people in there. You can run on-site surveys in addition to sort of surveys that you send out via email or whatever. This one is from Kettle and Fire, which is e-commerce in the bone broth space of all things, down in Austin, Texas. So when you,
yeah.
Sorry,
I'm familiar with them.
Yeah. So when you go and check out on their website, you get this pop-up from Typeform. This was on my Android device, but right, it asks you questions like, how did you hear about us? Which publication, which health influencer sort of talked about us, right? Quite useful data for them. If they can get this at scale from many customers, they can start to, figure out their marketing attribution, even on hard or impossible to attribute channels like podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. Podcasts are a big source for them, big source for us at Sparktoro. Very hard to attribute because, people are listening auditorily, and then they might come and find you through social media or search or brand later or type in or an email. Really tough to track that. This is a nice way to get some of that. If you have emails, you can ask people too, right? So we did like a big project. You can, if you want to get the slides, I actually have a blog post about this process where we essentially went and gathered specific feedback from our free users, got back tons of replies, had a bunch of great conversations with people, learned a tremendous amount, implemented those learnings, helped to kind of fix our growth curve as we were plateauing earlier this spring. And so, now we know things about our audience, right? We know how they describe themselves, what they're talking about, what they pay attention to, interests, hobbies, passions, job titles, all this type of stuff that we're learning from surveys and interviews. And then we're able to do something in a product like Sparktoro, or I'll show you a couple of semi-competitors. It's kind of a new space, so there's not a ton of players in it, but I can go figure out what my audience does, right? So if I know that a lot of people in my customer set have a particular attribute, like, oh, I saw that a lot of them use this hashtag Japanese food. Great. Let's go see what people who use the hashtag Japanese food are following and listening to and paying attention to and watching and reading and subscribing to. That's where I want to do my marketing, right? And then the next question is, which ones of these make sense for me to go pitch, co-market with, advertise on, build a relationship with, follow so I can learn more about their audience, see what's working for them, find out what they're covering. All of the networking types of things and pitching and outreach sorts of things that you would do in a, whatever, digital PR or influence marketing context. I like asking, generally, I like building relationships in a way that my competitors probably won't. So I've got a whole bunch of creative tactics in here that I won't get into in the presentation, but you can go check out the blog post if you want. If you find a source that is sending you some great traffic by, go into your Google Analytics, take a look at, oh yeah, wow, like these guys, they sent me not that many visits, but a lot of them who did come signed up for a free account. That suggests to me this is a very relevant publication. This is influencing the kind of audience I want to do. You can take them to SimilarWeb for free, scroll down to the bottom of basically what SimilarWeb gives you in a free report, the competitors and similar sites, and you can see a whole bunch of other websites that are similar to the one that sent you high quality traffic. That, again, expanding on, where am I going to find my audience? There's some other good tools here that you can check out. Helixa.ai. Brandwatch, if you've got a lot of money. Brandwatch is phenomenal, but just quite expensive on the enterprise size. And then Audience, spelled with an S instead of a C. I like, whenever I am doing this, this influence marketing process, I like to capture every email address I possibly can. And that is because email open rates are so much better than social. If you literally told me, hey, Rand, you can have one new email address or 1,000 new Facebook followers, I would take the email. I would take the email. There's so much you can do with an email, right? They convert. That's a beautiful thing just on its own. But the open rate hasn't really changed. Open rates, click-through rates, conversion rates, on average, according to all the like MailChimp data or whoever it is, they haven't changed in almost 20 years. Now, compare that to Facebook, where it's just gone, it's just fallen off a cliff the last 20 years. Well, whatever, 14 years since Facebook really got big. So you can also take an email and plug it into something like a full contact or Clearbit and get a whole bunch of rich data about your audience from there. We've done this. One of the Sparktoro features is like, once you've taken your email list and plugged it into these folks, we can go analyze all the social accounts that come out, give data, right? I think that in many cases, a flywheel like this might work for you, where you find some source that reaches your audience, you provide unique value to them, you wow that audience, right? And then you basically bring them to your site so that you can capture an email address and turn their audience into your audience. And now you've got something repeatable, scalable, true competitive advantage. This is so hard to beat. Like, once you've got an audience that is passionate, that knows you, likes you, trusts you, listens to you, that is a competitive advantage for the long term that no one can take away from you. Alrighty, friends. Roy, you mentioned that the slides and the presentation will be available afterward for folks as well.
Yep. I'll be adding a link to the deck to the description of the video. The recording of this video will also be at this same URL. So that'll be just a few minutes after the end of the show, but we'll be getting that there. So that we'll just move that link right in there.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Right. Well, we've got some questions. Obviously, your SEO fame is still a factor, much like Tim Ferriss always has to explain that, yeah, he does work more than 4 hours a week, but good problem to have as well. However, this bridges the gap a little bit as well, because the opportunity that Moz had and the opportunity that you're uncovering and building with Sparktoro is once again about identifying where the audience is. And at the time, and this is something that obviously I'm still in the trenches on. The opportunity for those large platforms was that the marketers hadn't all gotten there yet. And so just by being there, you already had a small advantage. That's evaporated. And so Sparktoro is sort of the continuation of that same kind of strategy. We've got a question from Jason. SEO agencies seem to be pumping the hype of the page experience update. Do you see this as a core piece of the SEO puzzle moving forward, or more of a smaller addition to the 200+ part algorithm?
Let's see. I have two responses to this. Oh man, almost three. So first off, thinking about Google as having a whole bunch of inputs and then a ranking algorithm and then an output hasn't been accurate for a long time. It's a machine learning system, right? And they've been very public about this. So basically, the machine learning system tries to figure out what will produce the result that is most likely to get the highest level of searcher satisfaction. And 200+ signals is it's sort of like 2009, right? The way the machine learning system thinks is any signal we can find that correlates or can be useful to get the correct output. So that's kind of a mindset shift that I would think about. There's no problem. There's nothing wrong with making a better page experience. Will it have a marked, measurable impact on your rankings and traffic? That is highly variable. For some companies who have everything else going right, and that's the missing piece, yes, it probably will help. Is that directly because it is a ranking element that the machine learning system uses? Maybe, maybe not, right? That it could just be because
neuroscience to some degree, right?
yeah, I mean, right. It could be that like, oh, well, now that our page experience is better, more people who come to our website don't click the back button and choose a different result from Google. And so Google's machine learning system is like, now your website like seems to be more preferred. Let's do that. But the third thing I would say about this is I am not an SEO expert anymore. It's been 3.5 years since I was in the field. I have paid almost no attention to the page experience update. Frankly, it is not where I think a true competitive advantage can be built. I feel like it's tinkering around the margins. It's one of those things where if you're missing core pieces of fundamental usability and UX and speed and search, user satisfaction, it will probably help you way more to fix those things than page experience. Sort of like mobile friendly. Remember Google was like hyping the mobile friendly thing and everybody who's not mobile friendly is going to be downranked. Never happened.
Right.
Never happened. Just, years and years of like, well, when's it coming? When's it coming? Oh, it's already been out for years. Oh, I didn't notice it. Yep. There you go. I suspect
shoppers are driving sites and e-commerce at least to that user experience improvement, not just because Google is going to dictate it. So, like, while StatBid has deep SEO experience, I am deeper on the paid search as an individual operator, and so my summary when I'm speaking to somebody who's not an expert in the scaling of digital marketing for e-commerce. What's the one thing I should know about SEO? It's the same as it is for paid: is be the most relevant result first, and then everything else is easier from there. And being in front of the right audience makes everything easier. Having a higher conversion rate makes everything easier. There are a lot of these things that behave more like a rising tide. And since you don't have that early adopter advantage that Google Ads had, or AdWords at the time in 2010 had, or that Facebook had in 2013, let's say. It's a little bit different equation, and if you do want those kind of multiplicative advantages, you'd have to find that where is that audience that my competitors haven't beaten me to it in order to get that that kind of multiple.
Yeah.
We do have one more question queued up already from Jarrett. I've been using Sparktoro, and it definitely gives me access to a ton of valuable info. What's your advice for how to properly organize lists in Sparktoro?
Yeah. Great question, Jared. The way I like doing it when I'm helping companies out is basically by the job to be done with the list. So if I have a list that is primarily, if I'm using Sparktoro today to try and build a list of whatever YouTube channels that I'm then going to go run ads against. Great. I call that list something related to, this is my YouTube ads list. Ad targeting list. Oh, I'm doing a list today that is mostly hashtags and things people are talking about because they're going to go into my content marketing ideas bucket for my blog post and newsletter list. Great. Let's make a different list for that. So I like that organization based on how I will be employing the data from the list that I'm building versus sort of organizing it by only a specific podcast list or only a specific websites list. I like to have that. Why am I building this list? What am I going to do with it in mind? And that way, a lot of the times when I'm building a list, I'm going to build it in Sparktoro because it's really convenient to be able to just click, and then add. But then I'm exporting it to Google Sheets or to Excel for my follow-up work, right? Whatever my workflow from there is. And I find that that's true for a lot of customers as well. Like they find that methodology really helpful.
Got it. Yeah. So like keeping your Snap-on wrenches next to your Craftsman wrenches rather than sorting them by the brand because the tool's brand is tangential to what you'll be doing with it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
totally. Right. Or if like, oh, I only ever use my Snap-on wrench when I'm doing stuff in my basement because that's where I need. Great. Put it with your basement supplies because it's there for the job to be done in the basement.
mhm.
Same principle.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a bunch of very nice comments as well, but that's the meat of the questions. So I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us, Rand. I did want to briefly share that the next couple of webinars we've got queued up are going to be similarly coming at finding new ways to get to audiences outside of the SEO PPC thing that StatBid could talk about that without dragging anyone else into it. Rather, we're using this entire series to go and talk to people who know more about other stuff than we do, and so we get to learn right along with you. And so I really appreciate you joining us today, Rand.
It is my absolute pleasure, Roy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone.